it's about persistence, right? We need to persist when it comes to affecting this change for our holistic purpose. And we need to be empowered. It's persistence, be empowered, and ask for what you want. And we need to know our options. Angela Burt Murray, she's a journalist and author and producer. She's moderating the panel. Sophia Bush is with us. She's an American actress, activist, entrepreneur, global education access advocate, and No Hormones Please spokesperson. And the bestseller of the book On the Edge, Allison Levine. She's incredible. And Amber Tamlin, who's an actress, director, writer, and poet. Please give them a welcome applause. Where was this to sit? I wasn't there. I have no idea. Thank you.
All right.
Does it matter where we sit?
It doesn't matter where you sit.
Okay.
Get comfortable for the last panel of the day.
All right.
The best panel of the day.
That's right.
Exactly.
I feel like everyone who's taking my picture should know that I'm breastfeeding, and so you can see my tits between here. This shirt used to fit beautifully, and now it doesn't anymore, so
I feel like
enjoy.
Everyone should know that I'm 51, so my boobs sag down to here.
And now this is great because in the green room we said, was anything off limits? And clearly nothing
And
is.
they told us to be personal, and so that's what we're doing.
Exactly. Okay. Any more breast comments, or we can move
I'm
on?
taped in. I feel like I'm good to go.
All right, great.
This is a consensual panel.
Yes.
Okay. Great.
Sorry.
No, it's great. This is great. We said be personable. We said be comfortable. So our topic is about persistence, and I think that we have three extraordinary women who certainly embody that concept, and it's really important that we have that dialogue now, especially with everything that we see going on in the world. But we want to talk about, you know, different moments in your careers and personal lives where you've had to dig deep and find persistence within yourself.
How long do we have?
Yeah. According to the
4
clock,
hours?
43 minutes.
Okay,
so,
great, cool.
You know, you want to keep it. You want to keep it pretty tight. But why don't we start with you, Sophia? Is there a moment that you feel like that was defining in terms of you deciding that I'm going to push through right now and get what I want?
Yeah, I think, and I'd imagine for all of us, there are mile markers you can look back at and say, that was a time of transformation. That was a time when I had to push through. I, speaking just for myself, think that the most recent and relevant is probably the fact that I just quit my job.
Okay.
And everyone...
And how did you come to that decision?
I won't necessarily get hyper specific about it. You know, we've spoken recently about how, and this is someone else's quote, not my own, but I think it's brilliant. You have to make sure you're taking care of yourself before you're taking care of others. And recently I heard the phrase, you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm.
Yes.
And I thought,
That's great, right?
there's an aha moment. Like, send it to Oprah, stamp it. But I realized that I had been really unhappy for a really long time, and that the things I was sort of showing up as Joan of Arc to try to make better every day were the things that I was most concerned with fixing, and a lot of other people weren't, because to a lot of other people the machine was working well enough. And it's a crazy thing when you're an actor and you have a job, and you know everyone wants a job, and when you have a job that, you know, when you were 19 and trying to become an actor you said was your dream job, and you realize sometimes that your fairy tales are not those things in reality. And so I had to make a decision, and then I had to be told that I was clearly not making the right decision, and I had to announce that I was still making the decision every day for a year, and then was able to make it. And yeah, it was a big moment of persistence, not necessarily to push through the thing that was not livable to me, but to say, the pattern stops now so that I can recreate my own. And that feels liberating, and that feels empowering.
Absolutely. I mean, that's such a brave thing for you to do for yourself. And I think that, you know, certainly as women, we can all attest to that feeling of you have to keep going. You have to do this, particularly when you're in a situation where you have this amazing career or you've reached that level that so many other people would want to be at, but you decide for yourself, this is not what I need right now. So, you know, that's really brave that you were able to do that. And did you have to kind of separate yourself from some people after that?
Not so much. I mean,
The critics, people who...
Oh, yeah, for sure. Oh, yeah. I go through periods where I turn the comments off.
Okay, good.
I'm like, oh, y'all bitchy little trolls, watch this. Off.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Look, you're gone.
Right.
Do you hate that? I don't care. It's a really nicely freeing thing to say, like, I don't deserve to be abused. So off. It feels good. I sort of picture, like, I don't know if any of you guys saw Wicked, when Kristen Chenoweth would do the, like, toss, toss. I'm just like, off, off. And it feels very good. Right. But I think that at the end of the day, you either operate from a place of love or a place of fear. And fear is the thing that places all of us in that scarcity mentality where we go, what is it going to mean and what's going to happen and how will I make it through it? And if I leave this, will I get another job? Will I? And especially in our industry, it's like they want you to just really be grateful all of the time that you have a job. And eventually you're like, I have a job because I work my ass off. Right. So I'm going to just get another job. It's cool. And
when you're ready.
When you're ready, but that takes loving yourself. And women aren't taught to do that.
Right. You're taught to take care of everybody else.
Yeah, so it takes a while to get there.
Right.
And then when you get there, you're still like, oh my God. And then, you know, you realize you're waking up super happy every day and you know you made the right decision.
Right. Now you touched on fear, overcoming fear. And I think Amber and Allison certainly personify fearlessness to me. I was saying backstage that Allison's whole life is like living somebody's bucket list every single day. Like the stuff that she does on a Tuesday is just extraordinary. But how do you get to living in fearlessness?
So I figured out that I was thinking about fear the wrong way. I used to think that fear was scary and it was kind of a negative emotion. And I learned to use fear to my advantage. Fear doesn't have to be negative. So first of all, fear is just a normal human emotion, right? Fear, so don't ever beat yourselves up for feeling scared or intimidated, right? Just remind yourself fear is normal. I use fear to my advantage because it keeps me alert, on my toes, aware of everything going on around me. Fear is only dangerous when it paralyzes you, right? So I always tell people fear is absolutely okay. Complacency is what will kill you. Complacency is what puts you at risk. It's okay to be scared, but just keep moving. Pick a direction and keep going. And that's kind of how I look at fear. I'm like, fear, all right. It's good if I'm not scared in the environments I'm in, if you're not scared when you're about to ascend the Hillary step at, 28,000 feet on Mount Everest, something's wrong with you. So it's good to be scared. Fear keeps you going and just don't let it paralyze you.
How does fear come into play for you, Amber?
Fear is mercurial, and I think it's deeply ingrained in the psyches of women. I've said many times before that I believe that women are often taught and believe that that their anxiety is and their intuition manifests as anxiety and fear. And we're taught from a very young age to not trust that. And we're taught from a very young age that those are bad things that come up in us. This idea that emotional thought or emotional presence is not as relevant as rational thought and presence. They're two incredibly important languages, and to dismiss wholly one over the other is abundantly patriarchal in so many ways. And so, for me, I've always felt like the idea of persistence and of being afraid to jump, to quit a show, to do things like that, to stand up for yourself, it's so important to think laterally as far as that's concerned, and not just consider the future that belongs to you, but consider the people that are next to you. And I'll give you a great example of that. We can talk about this as far as intersectionality. We can talk about this as far as feminism. There's so many avenues and conversations, but I know for me, One of my biggest fears was directing a screenplay into a film and being very scared to do that for the first time. And the woman who produced my film, her name is Ren Arthur, and I remember when the decision finally came and the person who had been attached to direct, we had sort of bumped heads, and I really had a very different vision of what the film should be. And she, female director, ultimately said to me, I think you're missing the point, and the point is you need to direct this movie. And I, of course, you know, I'm reading Hillary Clinton's book right now, and she talked about being a boss. And so many times when she promotes men, they say, thank you so much for this opportunity. I won't let you down. I'm so excited. And women will always say, thank you so much for this opportunity. Are you sure? And that's what I did.
Right.
And when I talk about looking laterally, Ren said to me, a lot of people are going to tell us that you shouldn't direct this. A lot of people are going to ask you to pull your name off of it as a director because you don't have the experience. We need to tell them to go fuck themselves. So hold my hand, we're doing this.
Right.
And that's what happened, and we pushed through. And it was really her belief in me, that support, that lateral support, that sort of changed the way that I looked at my relationship with other women. So when I think about fear, when I think about things that scare us, it's so important to look next to you and remember that everyone else around you is also terrified. And often sort of combining your own fears and connecting. You know, Sophia and I had like a very intense emotional conversation at an Emmy party. And I was like, I am hers. We're together forever. And that was like a great moment, and I reached out to her after and I said, I remember this and I'll never forget this conversation. And I think that that's just really important as far as acting on the fear and turning that fear into a different manifestation of something proactive and something that we can use to find out who we truly are.
So you talk about the need for lateral support and having women in your corner that sometimes believe in you more than you believe in yourself.
Yeah.
How can we build more inclusive and supportive communities as women? How can we find our tribe that's going to cheer us on and push us to do the thing that we're not quite sure we're ready for?
It's such a big conversation. The short of it for me is you support every single woman, no matter if they're smart, not smart, cruel, kind, beautiful, not attractive, talented, not talented, their voice is mediocre, their voice is superb, they have a vision, they're visionless. It doesn't matter. It has to be unanimous because we can't really know what our worth is as a whole until we support everyone unanimously who identifies as a woman, in my opinion.
Right.
So
now you have to have a tribe that you're in life or death situations, so you have to really count on people.
You do, and I think just to sort of add on to what Amber was saying, when you have a dream or when you have an incredible opportunity, either one, think about who you can take with you. Right? So I had this dream to, you know, when I was younger, I was just always fascinated by the stories of the early Arctic and Antarctic explorers and the early mountaineers going to all these cold places. I think because I grew up in Phoenix. So I just was mesmerized by these stories, and I thought, well, instead of reading books about, you know, people that crossed Antarctica on skis, then I should go do it. And instead of reading about these explorers going to these remote mountain ranges, I should go myself. And if these other guys can go do it, then why can't I? And then, well, wait, if I can do it, then why can't I bring a couple girlfriends with me? And then next thing you know, we have the first American Women's Everest expedition. And I had this dream that I wanted to climb this mountain, but then I thought, how much more awesome would it be if I could take 4 women with me? So when you have dreams, when you have opportunities, think about who you can take with you, and it's going to be that much better.
I have a tiny note which totally speaks to that, which was an experience I had recently at a general meeting with an executive at a studio, in which I told him that I had to leave early because I was going to do a Q&A with Aisha Tyler, who just directed a film called Axis. And I told him that I was going to do this Q&A with her in Los Angeles at the ArcLight. And he said, his first reaction to me, his very first reaction was, oh, is it good? And I said, I don't give a shit. I don't. I love Aisha Tyler. By the way, it is very good.
Right.
But I love her, and I will support her in her film, and whatever that may mean. So it's so important when you're talking about, I think, that mountain and seeing us all getting over that together in some capacity.
Right.
It's just, it has become so incredibly clear to me that is paramount.
Got to do it together.
That's great. So you and Sophia have this connection from an Emmy party, and
I wasn't at that party.
I know.
Come with us to the
Come
next
with us
one.
to the
though.
next one.
Just come with us.
They're so great. There's so many men. They just love to talk.
So we hide in the corner.
We hide in the corner.
So you have this, kind of connection, and I'm sure you inspire each other in many different ways with your careers and your activism and the things that you speak out on. But who are some of the other people, not necessarily in your Hollywood community, but other women that inspire you? Who are some of your feminist heroes?
Women are inspiring. And to your point about building an active tribe of women who you can take with you and who will take you along with them, I think it's incredibly important. I see so many young women in the audience today, and I hear from a lot of you guys. I get asked a lot, like, how do you build a girl crew like yours? And I'm like, I had really nasty friends in high school too. It's okay. Like, you don't know yet necessarily how to find good friends, and truly, let's be frank, how to be a good friend. You learn. Our mistakes teach us, our heartbreak teaches us, and I think as we get older and wiser and we know ourselves better, we immediately recognize the other, which feels familiar, faster. And so I've had the immense pleasure over the years of recognizing that thing in women where I'm just like, ride or die, like, done. Right. My girlfriend Ruthie is a speaker and a wonderful human. She suffered a catastrophic accident, lives with crippling chronic pain, and is the first person to say yes to go on any trip with me, is the first person who's like, my body hates me today, I'm in. She's the first person to get up on stages like this and speak to every person in an audience and remind them that their pain has purpose and that there is something waiting on the other side of that metaphorical mountain for them. I got to sit on a stage like this in New York last year and interview Ambassador Powers. And I was like, Ambassador Power, rather, and I was just like, this is insane. I'm literally interviewing the United States Ambassador to the United Nations. What am I doing here? It was that moment where I was like, are you sure? Wait, no, I know what, I do know. I know how to do this. So be it from sort of the upper echelon of governmental activism to like my girlfriend who, lives in Nashville and makes me laugh harder than anybody. I'm inspired by women everywhere. I'm every day I'm reading what's happening in the world and the news, and I'm looking at Twitter, and I'm just like, I like slow clap you. You're just like, yes, you said the thing, right. And it's so beautiful to look around and just be inspired by women who are living their truth and calling up other women to be with them while they do it.
That's really exciting to think about, right? Like there is this moment in time where we feel like there's this groundswell of young women who are just speaking up for themselves, whether
and
it
they're
be...
fucking mad.
Yes.
And
exactly.
that matters.
Right.
Like, anger matters, and we don't get to speak to that or process that or be allowed to be angry about anything. And I did not mean to interrupt you.
No, please.
But I really think that that's part of what's going on right now, is that there's this sort of sense of the way things were pre-2016 are done. Like that world doesn't exist to us as women anymore.
Right. And isn't it about time?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
God, it's about time.
Yeah. But how does that, sometimes when you are speaking from a place of anger, it can be difficult to get people to kind of engage with you and have the conversation. I know as an African-American woman, it's very difficult for me to be angry in public spaces and be heard. So I think that, women in general are starting to understand how challenging that can be to get your point across, to get men to understand what you're really talking about and why you're really angry, and you have a right to be angry. So how are you finding that you're able to have those sometimes challenging conversations,
Well,
but also channel that anger in the right direction.
Well, speaking again to talking about intersectionality and laterally, you know, for the first time in my life in the last year, I have had some really difficult, painful conversations with girlfriends of mine who are women of color, specifically women of color poets, about my behavior, about racially insensitive things I have done or said. So to speak towards that anger, and those are moments for me that have been so teachable and eye-opening, and I have had friends who have been mad at me and come to me and said, I couldn't tell you this before and I have to tell you now. And I'm so grateful for that anger, but also for that conversation and that ability to understand better my own limits and my own blind spots and my inability to act in the best possible way in a broader, you know, in a broader way for everybody. And to that end, it's really hard for me to think about. This is kind of where I get stuck, because I understand that being angry doesn't really help, and expressing that doesn't necessarily reach across any aisles or get you further in any larger conversations. But I am of the mind that right now everyone needs to sit in their anger, that as bad as things are in this moment, we are exactly where we're supposed to be in order to heal on the other side. And pushing anyone of color, pushing women, pushing trans, Muslim, pushing the alt-right, pushing the right, like anybody further away from their anger, I think is wrong in this moment, because the anger is tied so much to us connecting with who we truly are. For instance, the incident that just happened with Harvey Weinstein, and all of a sudden all these actresses start speaking out to it. They spoke out of anger. That's where that started from. That's where that dialogue began. And so while I understand it's not necessarily constructive all the time, I think the movement of it right now is so important in order to begin the difficult conversations that we need to have as a country.
And I think you have to allow yourself to feel angry.
Absolutely.
You have to allow yourself to feel sad. You have to process those emotions. But I also think that as much emotion and energy that we put into being angry or sad or upset, we should try to also put a lot of energy into listening. Right?
Yeah.
And if we put all the energy that we put into trying to convince someone of something, if we put that same amount of energy into listening, I think we could meet in the middle, and it can bring, you know, divisive parties together more easily.
I also think, to your point about processing, again, because women have always been taught to like be the good girl and not take up any space and make sure everyone else is okay.
To be motherly.
Yes, and to be like virginal, yet like don't ever not be sexy. You're like, wait, what? This is a mixed message. I'm so confused. You know, to echo what you were saying, we're not supposed to get angry. Right. So sometimes, just because I'm a human with emotions, I write out the thing I want to say from like my angriest, nastiest self. I am just like, no, like I type out the thing and I read it, and sometimes I screen grab it so I can keep it for myself, and then I delete it. Because I'm like, this person doesn't deserve this response. Ooh, but I'd like to give it to them. Right. And every once in a while I snap. Like every once in a while, pardon my French, I just tell somebody on Twitter to go fuck themselves. Because I'm like, you're a monster. Right. The thing you said is monstrous. I hope I embarrass you. And I hope you think differently the next time you speak to somebody this way. But I've learned, as you said, to think about how to channel it. Right. And sometimes I write out the immediate, fiery, angry response and save it for myself. Right. And then I take a day and I sit down
and then you send it anyway.
Yeah. And then I'm like, bam!
Right. There you go.
High traffic point. Take that. No.
Right.
I really think about how I would have a conversation with a person whose kid I knew. Because the thing is, I don't care if you are the farthest on the right or the left. If you get people talking about their kids, they will love each other, they will laugh together, they will enjoy each other. And so I think like, okay, super right-wing racist hypothetical uncle. If you were my actual uncle and you believed these things that you are coming to me telling me you believe, how would I talk to you about why I believe what I believe? How would I talk to you about how I believe everyone has a right to their opinions, but if your opinions don't come from a place of love and inclusion and intersectionality and equality for all, your opinions can remain your own, but they should not come into the legal system in any way. How do I make a gentle argument that is backed up with facts, that is filled with data? I love data. I love numbers. I love a graph. Please bring them to me all the time. Like, how do I make that more gentle argument? How do I channel my anger into something that feels purposeful? Because it is patriarchal to assume that I don't want to cuss somebody out who says vitriolic things to me. Of course I do. But I'm also like, I might want to say it, but it's probably not going to be helpful. So let me think about how to do this in a way with some space that gets us somewhere. And that in itself is an action of self-love, because that's when I remind myself that I deserve to take up space. I deserve to take a day to respond, should I need it. And that's okay. That's something a man would not apologize for. But men are allowed to get angry and they're passionate and firm. Women get angry and they're emotional and hysterical. So until we change the response, we have to figure out how to sort of tailor the action.
And the action is great, right? Like, all of this anger has fueled a lot of activism, and people who have been on the sidelines of so many important conversations are now stepping up and wanting to have difficult conversations with that awful uncle and coworker and, you know, other people. And that's really exciting. So the question becomes, what could we really turn this into with all this activation and all this anger and all this excitement and all this passion and enthusiasm? Like, what could this country look like for women in the next 2 to 3 years if we continue to push forward?
That's the $1 million question.
Yeah. Like, what is there something specific that you think, like, this would be the thing that would really change America for women if we were able to do this? Or just what's the climate going to be like in 2 to 3 years for young women?
I think we're doing it now. I feel like we're doing it now and we're changing it now. I feel like the volume and the momentum is at a level that I do not remember it being at before, you know, for a while. Remember, I'm 51. So I've been, you know, around a little while, but this, to me, this is something new and something special, and this is, you know, the energy, that the anger and the frustration, like, it's all gone into this big, huge snowball, and it's working. We are being heard, and people are stepping up and taking responsibility for things, and I feel like men are listening, and I do feel like we are making giant steps now. And we're not there, and we still have a long way to go, but I do feel like we're making giant steps because people like you guys and people like you guys are not afraid to speak up.
One of the most beautiful things, I could not agree with you more, one of the most beautiful things about everything that's happened in these last couple of weeks, you know, as far as actresses coming forward and speaking, are people who are not actresses coming forward and speaking, who work in the literary fields, or, like, I saw one woman who was a veterinarian who was talking, an assistant to a veterinarian who was talking about sexual harassment from the vet that worked there. I mean, the things that I've seen in my feeds is pretty incredible, and that's sort of a really beautiful unifying voice. And to speak to to speak to your sort of question or thought, I think it really is about getting more women in positions of power across the board. I think that is the answer to the change that we seek, to the world we all want to live in. You know, having women in positions of power, specifically women of color, so that the world and our country reflects the reality of who we are, as opposed to a patriarchal reality or a patriarchal narrative of looking like, you know, the narratives of just the ideals of men. And so I think, for instance, you know, Amazon recently fired their chief executive, rightfully so, and I had heard that they are looking into having a new woman executive come on, and I applaud them for that. And that's a great action, is to sort of not only right a wrong, but then also look towards the future of its rightness. And so to me, at the end of the day, from top to bottom, it's about filling those positions with more female voices.
Right.
It's like the course correction. Yeah. It's happening. The course correction is happening.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I imagine in your field, you face sexism on a whole nother level of, you know, being in that sort of field. Like, it's extraordinary.
20 years ago when I started climbing, it wasn't unusual for me to be the only woman on a mountain, just among all other male climbers. And, you know, over the years, there definitely have been men that I felt were not supportive. And it is scary because you're in a remote, extreme environment where you need the people around you to help you out if something should go wrong. And when you feel like people aren't looking out for you, that's a really scary feeling because there's nowhere to go.
Or
and
not
there
even
nowhere
not
to
looking
hide.
out for you, but rooting for you to fail.
Right, right. And that is, it is soul crushing. And I've had that happen, and it is soul crushing. Especially because when you're on, if it's a high profile expedition and you have a big sponsor, you know, Ford was the sponsor of the American Women's Everest Expedition, and we came to within 200 feet of the summit, and we had to turn back in bad weather, which was really disappointing. And, you know, we so wanted to be the first American Women's Everest Expedition to summit the mountain, and we had all this great press coverage before we left.
I feel like such a loser with what we do with Everest. I'm like,
I said that earlier. My whole life has been a waste.
Yeah, like I don't want to wear high heels. And she's like, and then we were climbing this mountain.
But I did climb in these. I did not climb in these. And then you come back and you don't make it, and then you're just the butt of Jay Leno's opening monologue joke. And how does that feel? Oof. Right? And just like, and people like, yeah, I knew they weren't going to make it. They didn't have a shot. And for me, what keeps me going through that is just feeling like I owe it to the people, the women that paved the way before me, that had the guts to get out there and break trail before I even got there. And so I'm working on a documentary now about a woman named Pasang Lamu Sherpa, who was the first female Sherpa to summit Mount Everest. And she had to fight the government of Nepal for permission to climb because they would let male Sherpas climb, but they would not let female Sherpas climb. So she fought the government of her own country for the right to climb. She tried 3 times unsuccessfully to make it to the summit, thwarted by bad weather like we were, or by climbing politics. She had a male expedition leader that wouldn't let her. She got all the way to the high camp, 26,000 feet, and he wouldn't let her try for the summit because he said she was a housewife. She wasn't going to make it. And so he wouldn't even give her a shot at the summit. So she was so infuriated that she decided to put together her own expedition, the first Nepali expedition. She's going to be the first Nepali female, the first Sherpa female. So Sherpa is an ethnicity. And she finally summited on her 4th attempt in 1993. But she died on the descent.
Oh. Wow.
So I think about her and the courage that she had, and that's what keeps me going through my failures, is feeling like we owe it to the women that got out there and had the guts and the courage to try, and the people that aren't around to tell their stories. So that's why we're making this film. So if you can check out the trailer at theglassceilingmovie.com if you want to just learn more about Pasang. But for me, that's what keeps me going through the naysayers and through the failures, because we're making this documentary and we're interviewing these young Nepali women that climbed Everest, and we say, what did Pasang mean to you? And this woman looks right in the camera. Her name's Shaylee, and she goes, well, because of Pasang, now when someone tells me that I can't do something, I just look them in the face and say, watch me. And so,
there you go.
You guys, even if you're pushing and you feel like you're running up against that wall, or you're not getting to the top of the mountain, or you're running into all of these roadblocks, remember, it's our responsibility to do this for the women that are going to follow in our footsteps down the road, women that we may never even know. They are looking to us to be those trailblazers. So that's why you cannot let failure stop you, and you cannot let barricades stop you. You have to just bust right through them.
That's a great point, but I also want you to talk a little bit about, it took you 8 years from that moment of not reaching the top of Everest to eventually get there. So what is the conversation with yourself over that time? So, what are you having to rebuild or figure out?
It was so hard to come back from a high-profile failure like that, because first American Women's Everest Expedition, 450 media outlets followed our climb. CNN's doing live updates from the mountain. We did the whole morning show circuit. The evening news anchors were interviewing us, and then we missed the summit by that much. So Then you come back and people are like, welcome back. Oh. You know, and you go back on the Today Show and same thing. They're like, hi, welcome back. How was the trip? Oh. You know, how do you feel? How does, you know, the whole experience? I feel like a loser. What do you think? You know, so I was so afraid to go back because, and I was the butt of Jay Leno's opening monologue joke, and so I just thought, what if I fail again, and how is that going to look, and how am I going to face all of these critics again if it happens to me? And so it took me 8 years before I got up enough guts to go back, and I actually went back to honor a friend of mine that passed away very suddenly at age 37 from the flu. And she was always this person that motivated me and inspired me. And I always thought, if I ever go back to Mount Everest, I would want to go with my friend Meg. And then she passed away. And so at that point, I was like, in order to honor her and just her spirit of courage, I'm going to go back to that stupid mountain. And I engraved her name in my ice axe. And I went back 8 years later, made it to the summit. And then what I realized when I stood on top of that mountain after everything I'd been through, right, 8 years and all that blood, sweat, and tears and the training and the scrounging for sponsorship dollars, and I get to the summit of the mountain, I realized that standing on top of Mount Everest is just not a big deal at all. It's really not. It's just like a pile of rock and ice. Who cares about standing on top of a pile of rock and ice? What matters are the lessons you learn along the way when you're fighting like hell to get up there, right? And what you're going to do with that information to be better going forward.
And we all have mountains, right? We don't
There's
all
always
have to
going
go
to be
Everest.
more mountains to climb. There's always going to be more mountains in my life. And even though I felt like I did my absolute best that day when I stood on the top of Mount Everest, I thought, you know what, there's always going to be more mountains, so tomorrow I have to be even better. You know, so just striving every day to be better, and you might get to the top of Mount Everest, but so what? You know, there's going to be more mountains, so it's just, remember the lessons you learn when you're fighting to get up there, right? And how you can use that to be better and to help other people to be better as well.
Right.
Can we be friends?
Where are we? We already are friends. Can I go to the Emmy party next year?
Yes.
There you go. There you go.
Come with us.
No, man,
So,
I'm so in.
Sophia and Amber, when you guys are facing mountains, do you have things that books or people or thoughts that you turn to so that you don't turn around from the summit? Like, how do you get over the mountain?
There's a really great Henry Miller quote that I posted recently that I was reminded of, where he said, all growth is a leap in the dark. And that's something I think about often, and the fear of change. And again, you know, looking next to me and seeing how scary it is to just exist as a woman in the world,
right? Starting
there, and then, you know, going into more minutia reasons. But I kind of, you know, I do the same thing when you were talking about taking a day to respond, or letting yourself sit with your own conversation first and your own thoughts and your own feelings before acting. And I've found that having this conversation with myself, and now that I've identified the difference between gut instinct and anxiety and fear, and knowing those things, I'm really able to talk to myself and figure out what it is that I want and how I want to present myself in the world. And then I act based on that. And whether or not I fail or succeed, I can say that I have acted, and I've acted on my own terms. And I think that that's so important. So that's sort of the way that I live, but also the way that I act, that I choose to act in the world. And I think that if women could be not just allowed, but if we can take away this idea that which we have been ingrained with since the beginning of time, that we shouldn't trust our instincts and our voices, then we can really start to process and think about what our voice is, what it means, what it sounds like, what it wants, what it needs, how it wants to exist in the world. And then we can just trust that above all else. Right. And we can hear that above all else. And that, to me, is the most beautiful voice that the earth has to offer. So in speaking to that, I think that the work begins internally and intrapersonally and deeply, and then from there you go out, you go forward, and you go to the side, and and you surround yourself with wonderful people and terrible people, because it's important to sort of to know what it all looks like. You know, it's true. It's kind of it's important to know what it all looks like.
Right. Sophia, any thoughts on overcoming mountains?
All of that.
All of that. Yeah.
All of that. I think there's a common misconception that once you've achieved enough, which is also always someone else's projection of enough, right? Yes. That you did it. Yeah. You climbed Everest. You'll never have another bad day. Right. Like, hey, you know, you've proven that you can carry television shows. Right. So you're done. And it's like,
or you'll never do anything more important. Like now, the rest of your life, you're being set up for disappointment.
Of course. Well, either you've peaked and you're like, thanks. Right. Or people imagine that now you're like bulletproof and so happy with yourself all of the time. Yes. And I'm like, is anyone else having crippling anxiety and thinks that they're just like a terrible person all the time? No, it's just me? Okay, great. Like, we all are plagued with fear and panic, and when I'm sort of in my highest self and I'm thinking about the ways in which I can go forth and exist, good days. The bad days, the thing that reminds me that it is not, you know, a disaster path. I just keep telling myself the thing that I tell the people who I love, because I think we have to learn how to love ourselves the way we love other people. And I think like, okay, what if this isn't happening to me? What if it's happening for me? Because to your point, those 8 years, you got home and you thought, look at this horrible thing that happened to me. The weather screwed me, and now I'm the butt of these jokes, and why are people making fun of me? And it's crippling. It is. But then you had your aha moment up on the mountain, and you were like, oh, the last 8 years were the point. It's always the journey. It's never the destination. So true. The destination is always a pile of rocks. It's like, people think television is fabulous, and I'm like, come hang out on a set for 15 hours when it's 35 below zero and tell me if you still like my job.
Television is a pile of rocks.
It's a pile of rocks also. They all are. Like, I don't care if you're a bank teller or an actor, like, your job is rocks a lot. So I really try to think about a perspective shift. What if this is happening for me? What if this is teaching me something? What if this day that makes me feel like I just can't do it is happening just to remind me that I can? Right. And that's a good place, I think, to start.
I like that so
beautiful.
much.
Well, we have like 3 minutes left, and you guys have been so gracious sharing all these wonderful insights into your own personal journeys and these stories that will inspire us as we leave. But what are some of your, to just kind of help the women in the audience, what are some of your personal self-care secrets to kind of help you push through? It doesn't have to be, you know, something that you physically do, but maybe it is something that you physically do that you found really helps you be able to continue to persist, but that you have to do for yourself.
So I have a dog, and I have a big slobbery black lab, and I swear when I look into his eyes, I just feel like I can do anything. Like, I want to go, like, because I think, oh my God, this amazing, loving thing, this is all I need. And all the criticism, it helps me drown out the doubt and the criticism and the, you know, anything negative. I just, looking into my dog's eyes, honestly, makes me so happy. Right. And then the other thing that I do for myself is I just remind myself, and if you remember nothing else that I said today, I want you to remember this. I remind myself that criticism and rejection is nothing more than one person's opinion at one point in time. That is all that it is. And I am not taking credit for that, because that's my friend Jia Jing. He wrote a book called Rejection Proof, and I just want to remind you guys of that. It's one person's opinion at one point in time. Who cares? There's a couple other billion people out there that might have a different opinion.
It's rocks.
Right?
It's just rocks.
Exactly.
It's rocks you can throw at somebody's head.
So we all need Allison to be our life coach.
I'm into it.
We need
She's
a
my
life
friend.
friend.
I'll lend you
She's
my dog.
friend.
And then everybody needs a dog. Okay,
Yeah.
Everyone
great.
needs a dog.
Exactly. Exactly. Amber?
What was the question?
Just
Like a pearl of
anything
wisdom,
that you
like
do,
pearls
your
of wisdom.
self-care. Well,
Like
if
self-care,
there's
what do you
something
do to, like,
that
Take frequent social media sabbaticals.
Yes.
Yes, right? Let's collectively all log off. We need like a national log off day.
Yeah, we just had it.
You have your pup, I have an 8-month-old daughter, and I was just saying backstage of like, every time I'm having a panic attack, freak out about the state of women, the state of womanhood, of feminism, of my own failures or the failures of people I love, and I look at my daughter and all she's doing is like trying to lift her butt up off the ground to crawl.
Yeah.
And all she's like, lady, I don't care what your problem is right now.
Right.
I'm trying to crawl. This is all that matters.
Right.
I'm trying to lift my head up. And for her, that's like the biggest thing in the world right now.
Yeah.
That's like consumes her entire life. And so I always think about that as a metaphor, and I feel like that's like me in the world sometimes. I'm like, I'm just trying to hold my head up.
Right.
That's all I'm trying to do here in front of other people, and it's really hard.
Right.
So I, definitely through and specifically having a daughter in these times, for me, that is just such a blessing and also such a way to see.
Right. Perspective.
It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's all going to be okay.
Is it? And it is.
Yeah.
It is. Sophia?
I lately have been focused on little things because it's really those sort of micro changes that create these big results. And it sounds so silly, but I was like, okay, I used to nanny and I used to be a camp counselor, and like, what were the things that were non-negotiables for my kids? I would make sure they got enough sleep. I would make sure they drank water. I would make sure they weren't eating garbage. And I would make sure that the activities we were doing were teaching them something and enlightening them in some way, or teaching them their own strength. So it's like we would read a really good book, or we would go on an outside adventure, and I would teach them how brilliant and powerful they were. And I'm like, oh, we need to kind of take care of ourselves like we would take care of a kid.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So do I drink enough water? No. Okay, I'm gonna work on that. Do I get enough sleep? Never. Working on it.
Right.
Do I eat garbage? All of the time. So I literally I had a day and I was like, God, this is really gonna suck. I threw away all my good chocolate. I threw away my 5-pound bags of gummy bears. I just threw out all the shit in my kitchen cabinet and was like, I'm going to Whole Foods. I'm like buying chia seeds and almonds, like a total cliche. But I'm eating things that I would feed a child whose care I was responsible for. And it sounds silly, but we all get caught up in like our schedules and our deadlines and our deliverables and all this stuff. I have a friend who runs a company that I'm so in awe of. I'm so proud of her. I'm proud of all my friends, including these friends and new friends. And she schedules a conference call. She has this conference call on her calendar every day from 1 to 2. It's not a conference call, it's a nap.
Nap.
She runs a baller company, and she has a non-negotiable, but she knows that in the world of baller companies, she can't say like, it's my self-care, I take a nap. So everyone she works with thinks she has a conference call every day at 1 o'clock, and she takes a nap because she deserves it.
Right.
And it's like,
There you go.
we have to love ourselves like kindergartners.
There you go.
Good one.
We deserve it.
We do. We do. Thank you all so
Thank
much.
you very much.
For all this